The metal hatch lay cold against Lafayette Poole's gloved hands as he stood exposed in the commander's position that September morning, scanning ahead through the pre-dawn darkness. His orders had arrived with unmistakable clarity. Stay on the flank, stay safe, keep the crew protected. No spearheading today. In less than an hour, he and his men would head stateside for a war bonds tour. Home was close enough to taste, but standing in that turret, 6 miles from Arson with the secured lines behind them, Pools carried a different truth burned into his bones by nearly 3 months of relentless combat. In war, safety was nothing but a comfortable lie. Beneath him, the Sherman tank bore the words "In the Mood" painted in white block letters across its hull. This was the 3rd time those words had adorned American steel under his command. The first 2 tanks that carried that name had been destroyed. Within the hour, this one would join them, a moment that would seal the deadliest tank-killing spree in American military history. The morning air reeked of diesel exhaust and burnt gunpowder from yesterday's fighting. Pools could hear other Shermans rumbling into position, the metallic clang of treads on cobblestone streets, tank commanders checking in over the radio with quiet, tense voices. Somewhere ahead in the buildings and rubble, German defenders waited with their 80 mm guns and Panzerfaust rockets. Weapons Pools had learned to respect and fear, but never to let paralyze him. His entire philosophy rested on one principle: strike first, strike hard, close the distance before the enemy could unleash their superior firepower. That aggression had kept him alive through 21 major engagements, through the loss of 2 tanks, through countless close calls where German rounds had missed by inches or bounced harmlessly off armor. But this morning, with home just days away, Pools's remarkable luck was about to end. June 14, 1941. Fort Sam Houston, Texas. A 21-year-old farm boy from Odom, Texas, walked into the recruitment office. His enlistment papers bore the signature of a young man who had left his engineering studies at Texas College of Arts and Industries to answer his country's call. Lafayette Pools stood 6 feet tall, his lanky frame built by years of working the dry South Texas soil, his hands calloused from rope and plow before they would ever learn the controls of a 33-ton Sherman tank. Born 5 minutes before his twin brother, John Thomas, on July 23, 1919, in the farming community of Odom, Pools grew up near Sinton. Both towns sat in the coastal plains where summer heat regularly exceeded 100 degrees and rain came rarely. Farm life in 1920s Texas meant relentless physical labor from sunrise to sunset. Working cattle, mending fences, repairing equipment with whatever materials could be salvaged or improvised. Electricity was a luxury few rural families possessed. Running water came from hand-pumped wells. Entertainment meant radio programs when batteries lasted and church gatherings on Sundays. Despite their different temperaments, Lafayette and his twin brother remained close. John Thomas would eventually join the Navy, serving throughout the war on Pacific ships. Their sister, Tenny May, completed the family. Their father, John McKinley Poole, and mother, Marion Lee Ruth Poole, instilled in their children the values of hard work, discipline, and service. Young Lafayette, called Lay by family and friends, showed exceptional athletic ability and academic promise from childhood. He attended Taft High School, graduating in 1937 as a standout football player whose speed and competitive fire made him impossible to ignore on the field. But his talents ran deeper than athletics. Poole possessed a sharp mind and fierce drive to excel academically. After graduating in 1937, he enrolled at Corpus Christi College Academy, an all-boys Catholic preparatory school renowned for rigorous academic standards. Poole thrived there, applying the same intensity he brought to football and farm work to his studies. He graduated as class valedictorian in 1938, an achievement that opened doors to his future education. He then enrolled at Texas College of Arts and Industries in Kingsville, now known as Texas A&M University Kingsville, majoring in engineering. His aptitude for mathematics and mechanical systems pointed toward a promising engineering career. But world events were about to interrupt that path. During his school years, Poole also pursued boxing, competing in the 165-pound weight class. Boxing suited his temperament perfectly. The sport demanded aggression, quick reflexes, strategic thinking, and the mental toughness to absorb punishment and keep fighting. Poole proved exceptionally skilled in the ring, compiling an impressive amateur record of 41 wins with no defeats. His aggressive style and powerful punches earned him the Sectional Golden Gloves Championship in New Orleans. The National Golden Gloves organization invited him to compete in the national finals, an opportunity that could have launched a professional career. Poole declined. Engineering studies called to him more than the uncertain life of a professional fighter. But the discipline, aggression, and competitive spirit that boxing developed would serve him far better in a different kind of fight entirely. By 1941, the world was engulfed in war. Germany had conquered most of Europe. Britain stood alone against the Nazi war machine. Japan was expanding across Asia. The United States officially remained neutral, yet everyone understood American entry was merely a matter of time. Young men across America faced a choice: wait to be drafted or enlist and have some say in their service branch. Poole made his decision. On June 14, 1941, exactly 6 months before Pearl Harbor would force America into the war, he walked into the recruitment office at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio and enlisted in the United States Army. He was 21 years old, 6 feet 2 inches tall, weighing approximately 175 pounds, possessing the physical conditioning of an athlete and the mental discipline of a scholar. The Army would transform him into something entirely different: a tank commander who would become the deadliest in American military history. The newly forming 3rd Armored Division at Camp Boredom, Louisiana, became Poole's introduction to mechanized warfare. Activated on April 15, 1941, just 2 months before Poole's enlistment as part of America's massive military buildup, the division would earn the nickname Spearhead for its role penetrating German defenses across France and into Germany, always leading the advance, always pushing deeper into enemy territory than any other unit. Poole's was assigned to the 3rd Battalion, 32nd Armored Regiment, where he would serve as a tank commander in the 3rd Platoon. This assignment would define his life. The 3rd Armored Division represented America's commitment to mechanized warfare, a relatively new concept that had proven devastatingly effective in German hands during their conquest of Poland and France. The division's structure reflected lessons learned from observing German panzer operations. It combined tank battalions with armored infantry, artillery, engineers, and support units, all trained to operate together as a cohesive fighting force. Tank battalions provided the primary striking power, initially equipped with the M3 Lee medium tank, a stopgap design with a 75mm gun mounted in a hull sponsor and a 37mm gun in a turret. The M3 Lee was obsolete before it entered service, but American tank production in 1941 couldn't yet deliver better designs in sufficient quantities. The M4 Sherman, which would become the standard American medium tank for the rest of the war, was just entering production when Poole's joined the Army. Training at Camp Boredom proved intense and demanding. Poole's and his fellow tankers learned to operate, maintain, and fight from armored vehicles under every conceivable condition. They practiced gunnery until they could identify targets and engage them in seconds. They learned radio procedures for coordinating with other tanks, infantry, and artillery. They studied German tactics and equipment, learning the capabilities and vulnerabilities of the panzers they would eventually face. They conducted endless field exercises, simulating attacks, defenses, and pursuit operations. The Louisiana countryside became their classroom, its forests and swamps mimicking the European battlefields where they would eventually fight. Poole's natural aggression, tactical instincts, and fierce competitive drive marked him immediately as exceptional. Officers noted his intensity during training exercises, his refusal to accept second place in anything. During gunnery practice, Poole's tank consistently scored among the highest in the battalion. During tactical exercises, he demonstrated an intuitive understanding of terrain and enemy positions that exceeded what could be taught in classrooms. He studied everything about tanks: how they moved, how they fought, where their vulnerabilities lay. He learned to read terrain like a book, identifying positions that offered advantages in fields of fire, concealment, and routes of advance or withdrawal. Most importantly, Pools demonstrated exceptional leadership. The men under his command respected him, trusted him, would follow him anywhere. That trust would be earned and re-earned dozens of times in combat. Pools demanded perfection from himself and his crew, pushing them through endless gunnery drills, driving practice and tactical maneuvers. He was not cruel or arbitrary in his demands. He simply understood that in combat, the difference between a well-trained crew and a mediocre one was the difference between life and death. Every second saved in target acquisition meant firing first. Every round that hit meant one less enemy tank shooting back. Every correct radio call meant better coordination and support. Pools drilled these lessons into his crew until their actions became instinctive. Load, aim, fire, reload became a rhythm as natural as breathing. Identify target, assess range, adjust fire became second nature. The crew would need every bit of that training when they finally entered combat. When the opportunity came to receive a commission as an officer, Pools refused. Commissioned officers commanded from battalion or company level, coordinating multiple tanks from command posts. Pools wanted to fight from a tank, to lead from the front, where he could see the enemy and make split-second tactical decisions. He preferred to remain close to his crew, close to the fight. That decision would prove defining. Staff sergeants did not normally command platoons in combat, but Pools's exceptional skills and aggressive leadership would see him leading multiple tanks in attack after attack, trusted by his superiors to accomplish missions that would normally fall to lieutenants or captains. Training continued through 1942 and into 1943, expanding beyond Camp Boredom to other locations. The 3rd Armored Division deployed to the Desert Training Center in the Mojave Desert of California and Arizona, where vast open spaces and harsh conditions provided excellent preparation for potential combat in North Africa. The desert maneuvers tested men and machines under extreme heat, choking dust and terrain that offered no concealment. Tank commanders learned to navigate by dead reckoning across featureless wastes. Crews learned to maintain their vehicles under conditions that caused metal to expand, seals to fail, and systems to overheat. The lessons learned would prove valuable, though the 3rd Armored Division would fight in Europe rather than Africa. After desert training, the division moved to Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania, for final preparation before deployment overseas. The rolling hills and forests of Pennsylvania more closely resembled European terrain than Louisiana swamps or California deserts. Here, the division practiced the combined arms tactics that would prove decisive in France and Germany. Tanks advanced with infantry support, protected by artillery fire, with engineers ready to breach obstacles and clear minefields. Radio discipline improved, maintenance procedures were refined, and weak points in organization and tactics were identified and corrected. By late 1943, the 3rd Armored Division was as ready for combat as training could make it. During these years of training, Pools experienced important events in his personal life. He married Evelyn Wright while on leave in December 1942, a brief moment of normalcy and happiness before departing for the war that would define his generation. Evelyn would wait for him throughout the war, writing letters that sustained Pools through the darkest moments of combat, eventually raising a family that would include 8 children, 4 sons and 4 daughters. The marriage would last until Pools's death nearly 50 years later, a testament to the strength of the bond they formed during those precious moments together. In September 1943, Pools and the 32nd Armored Regiment boarded troop ships in New York Harbor, crossing the Atlantic to stage in England. The crossing took approximately 2 weeks, with thousands of soldiers packed into converted passenger liners and cargo ships, sleeping in cramped quarters, enduring rough seas and the constant fear of German U-boats. The convoy zigzagged across the Atlantic to avoid submarine wolf packs, protected by destroyer escorts that patrolled the periphery, dropping depth charges whenever sonar contacts suggested possible submarines. Pools and his fellow tankers arrived safely in Liverpool in late September 1943. The 3rd Armored Division would spend 9 months in England, from September 1943 to June 1944, continuing training and preparing for the cross-channel invasion that everyone knew was coming. The division had been staging its operations from positions near Liverpool and Bristol, situated in Somerset. Across the English countryside, they conducted endless training exercises, learning how to coordinate with British units and gradually receiving the final shipments of equipment and replacements needed to bring the formation to its full authorized strength. The waiting became increasingly difficult to bear. Everyone understood that an invasion was coming, that combat would follow, but the uncertainty gnawed at them. No one could say precisely when it would happen or where. Rumors spread through the camps constantly. Security remained extremely tight. Training schedules continued relentlessly. During this period, Poole experienced his sole defeat in the boxing ring. Joe Louis, the heavyweight boxing champion, known throughout the boxing world as the Brown Bomber, traveled through England during July 1944, staging exhibition matches for the servicemen. Louis stood as arguably the finest heavyweight boxer to ever live, a cultural figure whose triumphs in the ring had come to symbolize American power and national resolve. His second match against German boxer Max Schmeling in 1938 had taken on profound political weight, becoming a symbolic rejection of Nazi racial ideology. Now Louis leveraged his celebrity status to lift troop morale, stepping into the ring for friendly sparring sessions with enlisted men. Most soldiers hesitated to volunteer for matches against the world heavyweight champion, but Poole, eternally confident and intensely competitive, stepped forward immediately when an exhibition bout was proposed. The match was set for July 4, 1944, while Poole's unit stayed in Liverpool. The plan called for friendly, casual sparring purely for entertainment. Poole had other intentions. His natural competitive drive and fighter's instinct took over completely. He attacked Louis aggressively, connecting with several solid punches that surprised even the champion. Louis responded by wrapping an arm around Poole and speaking quietly. "White man, I'm going to teach you a big lesson." That education arrived swiftly and thoroughly. Louis went to work, demonstrating his superior speed, devastating power, and technical mastery. He dominated the young sergeant without inflicting any serious harm, instead using the bout to illustrate the enormous chasm separating amateur from professional boxing. Though Louis could have dropped Poole at any moment with a knockout punch, he chose instead to showcase the gap between their levels. Poole would acknowledge afterward that Joe Louis had turned him completely around during that exhibition. Yet Poole departed with something more valuable than victory might have provided. He discovered that even tremendous power and superior physical abilities could be neutralized with the correct strategy, precise timing, and the right opening. Aggression by itself proved insufficient. Technique, perfect timing, and intelligent tactics mattered enormously. These hard-won lessons would prove invaluable in the combat operations that lay ahead. On June 23, 1944, at the English port of Weymouth, the 3rd Armoured Division began embarking on ships destined for Normandy. D-Day itself had occurred on June 6, 18 days before this moment. Allied forces had seized the beachhead and were driving deeper inland despite stubborn German opposition. Now follow-on divisions like the 3rd Armoured Division would make the crossing to reinforce the expanding battle. Division tanks and vehicles underwent meticulous waterproofing procedures, with protective coverings and seals placed over every opening to prevent salt water from entering engines and compartments during the journey from landing craft to the shore. The preparation was exhaustive, yet the men felt anxious regardless. Stories circulated about the confusion on D-Day itself, about the terrible casualties at Omaha Beach, about the ferocious combat in the Norman bocage. Now they faced their own crossing. On June 24, 1944, at Omaha Beach in Normandy, France, the 3rd Armoured Division came ashore 18 days after D-Day itself, wading through steady rain that had transformed the beach into a chaotic spectacle of men, vehicles, and supplies being sorted through crowded processing areas. The beach itself still displayed the destruction left by the initial landing. Damaged landing craft remained half submerged in the shallow water offshore. Ruined German defensive installations scarred the bluffs above. Enormous stockpiles of ammunition, fuel, food, and equipment covered every patch of available ground. Military police controlled the movement of traffic, attempting to maintain some semblance of order as thousands upon thousands of vehicles rolled inland toward assembly zones. The air carried the combined odors of seawater mingled with diesel fuel, wet soil, and lingering explosive residue. Poole's first Sherman, an M4A1 equipped with a 75mm gun, emerged from the landing craft without complications. The waterproofing remained intact, the engine fired up, and the tank churned up the beach under its own power. Through the following several days, the division occupied its assigned positions, stripped away the waterproofing, conducted weapons tests, performed maintenance operations, and made final combat preparations. Poole's crew had worked together for months, achieving the kind of coordinated excellence that meant survival or death in actual combat. Now they would discover whether those months of preparation adequately prepared them for genuine warfare. Poole had personally selected each crew member, choosing individuals whose abilities and character complemented each other and matched his own aggressive combat philosophy. Corporal Wilbert Richards, nicknamed Baby because of his youthful-looking face, despite being 24, served as the driver. Richards measured only 5 feet 4 inches in height, compact and wiry, but possessed remarkable skill at controlling the Sherman. Poole claimed that Baby could parallel park the 33-ton Sherman on a crowded New York City street during rush hour, an exaggeration that nonetheless contained genuine truth. Richards could steer the massive tank through cramped village streets, reverse it at full speed while receiving fire, and position the Sherman for optimal gun angles with accuracy beyond what most drivers could achieve. Richards kept his driver's hatch open whenever circumstances allowed. A training accident had once trapped him inside the tank when a hatch had jammed, and that experience left him with an intense fear of being trapped inside a burning tank, a terror that all tankers knew but which Richards felt particularly acutely. The open hatch gave him superior visibility and a quicker escape option if rounds struck the tank, though it simultaneously exposed him to shell fragments and rifle fire. Private First Class Bertrand Close, just 17 years old and nicknamed Schoolboy for his youth and wire-rimmed eyeglasses, worked as assistant driver and bowgunner, operating the .30 caliber Browning M1919 machine gun positioned in the front of the hull. Close hailed from Portland, Oregon, and appeared every bit the teenager he was, smooth-featured and slightly built, looking even younger than his actual age. Appearances deceived entirely. Close operated that bow gun with lethal efficiency, cutting down enemy infantry with disciplined fire. His position in the right front of the tank provided excellent fields of fire forward and rightward, covering the approach routes that enemy soldiers would use to get close enough to attack the tank with anti-tank weapons or magnetic mines. Close also bore responsibility for helping feed ammunition during fierce combat, passing rounds from the storage racks to the loader when speed became critical. Corporal Willis Oller, 29 years old and nicknamed Groundhog, manned the main gun. Oller came from Illinois, older than his crewmates, and possessed a measured, deliberate temperament that contrasted sharply with Poole's intensity. Oller seemed to view the entire French landscape through his gun sight, his face perpetually marked by the circular impression of his gunner's goggles. His eye remained fixed to the sight constantly, prepared to fire instantaneously. The gunner position represented perhaps the most demanding role in the tank. The gunner had to spot targets rapidly, calculate distance accurately, determine the correct ammunition type, aim precisely while the tank was in motion, and fire at precisely the optimal instant. All of this occurred in mere seconds, frequently while enduring enemy fire, with explosions rattling the tank and smoke obscuring vision. Oller excelled at this grueling position. His accurately placed shots would destroy German tank after German tank throughout the following months, validating Poole's confidence in his abilities. Technician 5th Class Delbert Boggs, 22 years old from Lancaster, Ohio, and nicknamed Jailbird, served as the ammunition loader. The nickname allegedly came from his background. According to crew stories, Boggs had faced manslaughter charges and received a choice from the court: prison or military service. Boggs chose the army, bringing with him a hardness and street-learned wisdom that proved invaluable in combat. Regardless of whether the account was entirely accurate or partially embellished, the story reflected something fundamental about Boggs's character. He was tough, reliable, and absolutely dependable when under fire. The loader job demanded significant physical effort. A single 75mm round weighed approximately 25 pounds, and the 76mm rounds they would eventually use weighed even more. During intense combat, the loader might manipulate dozens of rounds, selecting the correct ammunition type when Poole commanded it, loading smoothly despite the tight space and the violent motion of the tank, then immediately preparing the next round. Boggs appeared slight but possessed wiry strength and remarkable stamina. His speed and dependability at loading gave Poole's tank a rate of fire that surpassed most other Shermans. These 4 men under Poole's command called themselves the Pups, and they called their leader War Daddy, a nickname expressing both affection and deep respect for the man who led them repeatedly into the most dangerous situations. The nickname War Daddy had emerged during their training period, when Poole's relentless focus on combat readiness and his protective concern for his crew created a dynamic where he functioned simultaneously as their commander and their guardian. Though Poole was younger than Ola and not substantially older than the others, his commanding presence and natural leadership ability made him the crew's focal point. They trusted him absolutely. This trust would face severe testing dozens of times in the approaching months. The crew had regularly defeated other division crews in gunnery competitions during training exercises. Their coordination was flawless, each man understanding his responsibilities, trusting his fellow crew members. When Poole issued a fire command, the crew responded with mechanical precision. Driver stops, gunner rotates the turret forward, the round is already on the way, and the gun fires. The complete sequence from target identification to firing could require less than 5 seconds with a proficient crew. Poole's crew accomplished it in 3. That speed would save their lives repeatedly. Poole's tactical approach was straightforward and uncompromising, refined through extensive training and careful study of German tank tactics. Fire first, fire to eliminate, always move forward, never move backward. He believed in pushing aggressively toward enemy positions, in reaching distances where the Sherman's advantages in maneuverability, rate of fire and crew training could overcome German advantages in armor protection and firepower. German tanks, including the Panther and Tiger, possessed superior guns and thicker armor, capable of piercing a Sherman from long range, while the Sherman could not penetrate their front armor. The strategy was to prevent long-distance engagements. Poole advanced aggressively, maneuvering to strike the enemy's flanks, where even a Panther's heavy armor could be defeated. He overwhelmed German crews with rapid, accurate fire before they could leverage their superior firepower effectively. Poole suffered from claustrophobia, choosing to ride exposed on the turret or atop the tank rather than sealed inside. This represented both advantage and disadvantage. The disadvantage was apparent. Exposed on top, Poole faced danger from shell fragments, small arms rounds, and the shockwaves from nearby explosions. Numerous tank commanders had been killed or wounded by fire that the tank's armor would have stopped if they had remained sealed inside. But the advantage proved equally significant. Standing in the open hatch or positioned on the turret, Poole possessed vastly superior visibility compared to commanders fighting sealed inside, observing the battlefield through periscopes and vision ports. He identified threats earlier, located targets faster, and maintained clearer awareness of the overall tactical situation. He perceived the battlefield in full 3-dimensional perspective, rather than the restricted views that periscopes provided. That visibility advantage frequently determined whether Poole's crew fired first or received fire first. In tank engagements, firing first typically meant survival. Poole's battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Walter Richardson, was also from Texas, and these 2 men developed a relationship grounded in mutual respect and shared aggressive temperament. Richardson recognized Poole's exceptional abilities and assigned him progressively greater responsibilities despite his rank as staff sergeant. Richardson observed that Poole drove his tank like a bucking bronco, always exposed, always vulnerable, always in the lead. That aggressive leadership approach motivated Poole's crew and made him the logical choice for spearhead operations. Richardson repeatedly tasked Poole with the most hazardous assignments, to command attacks into the most heavily fortified zones. Poole never declined, never paused. He simply mounted his tank and led forward. Before Poole's Sherman entered battle, it required a name. Tank crews typically painted names on their vehicles, personalizing the steel machines they inhabited and trusted with their lives. Poole selected in the mood, taken from Glenn Miller's popular swing composition that had been an enormous hit in 1940 and remained beloved among American troops. The song's driving pace and lively character reflected something central to Poole's approach. Assertive, assured, unstoppable, the name would eventually achieve legendary status. On June 29, 1944, at Villiers-Fossard, France, Combat Command A of the 3rd Armoured Division received its assignment: reduce a German salient positioned northeast of Saint-Lô, a fortified position controlled by an reinforced Fusilier battalion from the 350th Infantry Division. This represented the division's opening combat engagement and Poole's initial experience under fire. The operation required attacking a 3,000-yard deep salient, protecting the town of Villiers-Fossard, situated east of the Vire River and north of Saint-Lô. The Germans had prepared strong defensive positions, taking full advantage of the Normandy hedgerows that turned every field into a natural fortress. The hedgerows of Normandy proved one of the most significant terrain challenges American forces faced in France. Built up over centuries, the hedgerows consisted of thick earth and walls 3 to 4 feet high, crowned with dense vegetation of bushes and small trees. They lined every field and road, creating a maze of natural fortifications that channeled movement and provided perfect concealment for defensive positions. German infantry and anti-tank guns could hide behind hedgerows, invisible until attackers came within point-blank range. Tanks attempting to climb over hedgerows exposed their vulnerable belly armor to enemy fire. The first American attacks in Normandy had been costly disasters as units learned these lessons in blood. American engineers developed a solution. They cut large steel beams from the German beach obstacles that had been intended to stop the D-Day invasion and welded these beams onto the fronts of Sherman tanks, creating battering rams called Rhino tanks. These modified Shermans could smash through hedgerows at speed without climbing over them, allowing tanks to maintain their armor protection while breaking through into adjacent fields. The innovation transformed the tactical situation, giving American armor the mobility needed to operate effectively in the hedgerow country. At 0900 hours on June 29th, Combat Command A launched its attack with Task Forces X and Y, advancing abreast toward Villiers-Fossard. Poole's platoon moved with Task Force Y on the right flank. Artillery preparation preceded the advance, with American guns pounding German positions for 30 minutes before the tanks moved forward. The bombardment filled the air with the shriek of shells and the thunder of explosions. Then came the order to advance. Poole's Sherman moved forward with other tanks of Task Force Y, grinding through the Norman countryside toward the German positions. Visibility was limited to the next hedgerow, sometimes only 50 yards away. Radio chatter filled Poole's headset as other tank commanders reported contacts, called for artillery support, coordinated their movements. The distinctive crack of German 75mm anti-tank guns echoed across the battlefield, answered by the deeper boom of American tank guns. Black smoke from burning vehicles drifted across the fields. Poole spotted German vehicles ahead through gaps in the hedgerows. Half-track, 10 o'clock 300 yards. He gave the fire command, and Ola sent a 75mm high-explosive round-down range. The round hit the German vehicle squarely, and it exploded in flames. Poole's crew destroyed 3 German vehicles and killed over 70 enemy soldiers during that first day of combat. The violence and chaos of armored combat proved exactly what Poole's had trained for. Yet training could never fully prepare anyone for the reality. The noise was overwhelming. The fear was real. The adrenaline made time seem to both speed up and slow down simultaneously. But Poole's training took over. He moved aggressively, pushing forward, refusing to yield ground. His crew responded with discipline and precision, each man performing his role exactly as drilled during countless training exercises. Then came the moment every tank crew feared. In the mood entered the village of Lyforge, part of the Villiers-Fossard combat area, advancing down a narrow street between stone buildings. The village was supposedly clear of enemy forces, but intelligence was incomplete, and situations changed rapidly in combat. As the Sherman rolled down the street, a German soldier with a Panzerfaust stepped from a doorway, aimed the shoulder-fired anti-tank weapon, and fired from less than 50 yards away. The Panzer Faust was a simple but effective weapon. A shaped charge warhead on the end of a disposable launcher, it could penetrate over 200 millimeters of armor, more than enough to destroy a Sherman. The rocket motor ignited with a whish, and the warhead streaked across the short distance, slamming into in the mood side armor with a metallic crash that rang through the crew compartment. The shaped charge detonated against the armor, creating a jet of superheated metal that punched through into the crew compartment. The tank shuddered violently, smoke filled the interior. Alarms sounded, Pools gave the immediate order, bail out. All 5 crew members scrambled from the disabled tank, moving with the practiced speed that training had instilled. Pools was first out through the commander's hatch, followed by Ola. Richards and Close exited through the driver and assistant driver hatches in the front hull. Boggs squeezed through the loader's hatch. They all escaped before ammunition could cook off or fire spread through the vehicle. The crew had survived their first tank loss with no casualties, though the experience left them shaken. In the Mood, the first Sherman to bear that name was destroyed. The crew had lasted exactly 5 days in combat. Pools and his crew rejoined Task Force Y on foot, hitching rides on other tanks until they could be assigned a replacement vehicle. The battle for Villiers-Fossard continued through June 30th, Combat Command, lost 31 tanks and 12 other vehicles during the 2-day battle. A stark introduction to the reality of armored combat in Normandy. German defensive fire was accurate and deadly. The terrain favored the defenders at every turn, but the attacks succeeded. American forces seized Villiers-Fossard and held it until relieved by elements of the 29th Infantry Division. The 3rd Armored Division had passed its first test, learning valuable lessons about hedgerow fighting that would serve it well in the weeks ahead. July 1st, 1944, somewhere in Normandy. Pools and his crew received their replacement tank, an M41 with the new 76mm main gun, designated M4176W. Pools was the first tank commander in his regiment to receive this upgraded variant. A recognition of his performance during the Villiers-Fossard battle. The new tank represented a significant improvement in firepower. The W stood for wet storage, a critical safety feature where ammunition racks were surrounded by containers filled with a mixture of water, ethylene glycol, and a rust inhibitor known as Ammodamp. This wet storage dramatically reduced the risk of catastrophic fire when the tank was penetrated. Early model Shermans had a terrible reputation for burning when hit, earning the nickname Ronson from German tankers, after the cigarette lighter that advertised light's first time every time. The wet storage system greatly improved crew's survivability. The 76mm gun represented a quantum leap in armor penetration capability compared to the 75mm. While the 75mm M3 gun could only penetrate a Panther's frontal armor at ranges under 100 yards under ideal conditions, the 76mm M1 gun could penetrate Panther's side armor at 2,000 yards and frontal armor at ranges up to 500 yards when using armor-piercing ammunition. Against German Mark IV tanks, the most common German medium tank, the 76mm was effective at even longer ranges. The trade-off was that the 76mm fired a less effective high-explosive round than the 75mm, making it slightly less useful against infantry and soft targets. But for Poole's aggressive, close-range tank hunting tactics, the improved anti-armac capability was invaluable. Poole immediately had in the Mood painted on the new hull, maintaining the tradition. The crew climbed aboard their new ride, familiarizing themselves with the slightly different layout and controls. The 76mm gun was longer and heavier than the 75mm, changing the tank's balance slightly. The internal arrangement of ammunition storage differed. The crew needed to learn these differences to make the new tank their own. Over the next 6 weeks, Poole and his crew would write the most remarkable chapter in American tank warfare history with this vehicle. The hedgerow fighting of Normandy tested every tanker's skill and nerve. The battle rhythm was brutally simple: advance to a hedgerow, take fire from the next hedgerow, call for artillery support, assault through the hedgerow and a covering fire, clear the field of enemy infantry, advanced to the next hedgerow, repeat endlessly day after day. Visibility was measured in yards, ambushes came from every direction. German 75mm and 88mm anti-tank guns lurked behind every stone wall and hedgerow, their long barrels carefully concealed until American tanks came within killing range. German infantry with Panzerfasts infiltrated close to American positions at night, waiting for the chance to fire their shaped charge warheads into tank sides or rear armor. The casualty rate for tank crews was staggering, but Poole's tactical instincts proved exceptional. He developed a sixth sense for reading terrain, for identifying likely enemy positions before they revealed themselves. He studied the way shadows fell, the patterns of vegetation, the sight lines from different positions. He learned to recognize the telltale signs of defensive preparation, the subtle disturbances in foliage that might conceal a gun position, the optimal firing positions that an experienced enemy would naturally choose. This ability to think like the enemy, to anticipate their actions, gave Poole a crucial edge. He spotted threats before they spotted him. He engaged first, usually destroying enemy positions before they could return effective fire. On one occasion, advancing at dusk near the town of Lemesnil-Herman, Poole was about to order his driver to halt for the night when a shape materialized in the darkness 50 feet ahead. A German 40mm anti-aircraft gun in placement, its crew unaware of the Sherman's presence. The Germans were settling in for the night, moving around their position without the discipline of men expecting immediate contact. Poole recognized instantly that he had seconds to act before the German crew spotted his tank. Without warning, without giving away his position, with orders over the radio that might be overheard, Poole simply shouted, "Gunner fire." The command was pure instinct, pure aggression. Oller's eye was already pressed to the sight, as it always was. His hands moved instantly to the firing controls. The 76mm gun roared, sending an armor-piercing round directly at the German position. The projectile covered the short distance in a fraction of a second, striking the 40mm gun squarely. The impact destroyed the gun and killed or wounded the crew instantly. The entire engagement, from Poole spotting the target to the round impacting, took perhaps 3 seconds. That instant reaction, the product of hundreds of hours of training and growing combat experience, typified the crew's efficiency. They had achieved the ideal state for combat soldiers, where training becomes instinct and decisions happen faster than conscious thought. Another night engagement near Colombia, France, nearly ended in disaster, but instead demonstrated Poole's tactical brilliance and his crew's exceptional skill. Poole's platoon was advancing in darkness, moving cautiously through hedgerow country, where visibility was limited to a few yards. Night operations were extremely dangerous for tanks. Visibility was minimal, even with the tank's crude infrared equipment. Enemy infantry could get very close under cover of darkness. Friendly fire incidents were common when units lost track of each other's positions. But the tactical situation demanded night movement, and Poole led his platoon forward. Suddenly, in the mood, almost collided with a German Panther tank. The two vehicles came around adjacent corners of a hedgerow and found themselves facing each other at a range of perhaps 30 yards. The Panther was one of the most feared armored vehicles in the Wehrmacht arsenal. It mounted a 75mm KWK-42 gun that could penetrate a Sherman's frontal armor at over 2,000 yards. The Panther's frontal armor was nearly impenetrable to the Sherman's 76mm gun, except at very close range. On paper, the Panther was superior to the Sherman in every measurable category, except perhaps mechanical reliability. German tankers called the Sherman a Zippo lighter, claiming they could destroy Shermans easily, while American rounds bounced harmlessly off Panther armor. But combat is not fought on paper. Poole's superior crew training and aggressive tactics negated the German technical advantages. Both commanders spotted each other simultaneously. Both tank crews opened fire simultaneously. The Panther's gunner squeezed off 2 rounds in quick succession, but the sudden shock of contact, and rushed aiming through both shots wide. The first screamed over the turret with a sharp crack of compressed air. The second impacted the ground directly ahead of the Sherman, its trajectory carrying it upward in a vicious ricochet that missed the hull's belly armor by mere inches. Allah's response came clean and true. A single 76mm armor-piercing round, fired from near point-blank distance, struck precisely where vulnerability lay. The turret ring, that critical junction where rotating turret met stationary hull. The penetrator punched through and detonated inside, an explosion of fire that consumed ammunition and crew in the same instant. The German tank transformed into a blazing inferno, its violent flames painting the surrounding landscape in harsh orange light. The sudden brightness shattered Poole's night vision, yet it also exposed something crucial: other German armor lurking nearby in the darkness. Poole didn't hesitate. He radioed urgent orders for his platoon to engage the additional targets while simultaneously reversing, putting distance between his tank and that burning Panther before its ammunition magazine erupted with catastrophic force. From first shot to flaming wreck took perhaps 10 seconds. Poole had defeated a technically superior adversary through something far more valuable than thick steel: superior crew coordination, better training, quicker reactions, and precise marksmanship. Word of Poole's victory raced through the battalion, then spread across the entire division. American tankers had developed genuine dread of Panthers and Tigers. Rumors flourished about German supertanks that could obliterate Shermans from distances where American guns couldn't even reach back. Crew morale took a real hit when facing these feared machines. But Poole changed the calculation. He demonstrated that German tanks could absolutely be destroyed. Aggressive tactics, solid crew discipline, and accurate fire could overcome pure technical disadvantage. Poole's aggressive example galvanized other commanders. They began fighting with renewed determination, pushing to close distance where American advantages, maneuverability, and higher rate of fire compensated for their weaker guns and thinner armor protection. July 26, 1944. Operation Cobra commenced with one of military history's most intense bombing campaigns. More than 1,500 American heavy bombers and 380 medium bombers unleashed nearly 4,000 tons of ordnance on German defensive positions just south of St. Lo, all within a few hours. The bombardment aimed to obliterate German fortifications, smashing through their lines to create an opening for American armor to surge into the open terrain beyond the bocage. The plan succeeded spectacularly, despite heartbreaking friendly fire casualties that claimed over 100 American soldiers, among them Lieutenant General Leslie McNair. The German defensive positions simply disintegrated under that unprecedented weight of explosives. What remained of their fortifications no longer functioned as coherent defense systems. Survivors stumbled forward in shock, disoriented, and largely incapable of mounting organized resistance. The 3rd Armored Division spearheaded the breakthrough, smashing through devastated German lines on July 29th and racing southward into open country. After weeks of brutal hedgerow combat, where daily progress meant hundreds of yards bought dearly, the division suddenly transitioned into mobile warfare. Tanks accelerated down roads at 20 and 30 miles per hour, covering distances in mere hours that would have required weeks of previous fighting. German forces, outflanked and cut off by this rapid American surge, attempted withdrawal, but discovered escape routes sealed. Thousands threw down their weapons and surrendered. Those foolish enough to resist found themselves buried under superior firepower and mobility they couldn't match. Poole's tanks led attack after attack during this headlong advance, perpetually at point, constantly driving forward. The spearhead position carried paradox, tremendous honor and near-certain death in equal measure. The lead tank always contacted enemy positions first, always drew fire from anti-tank weapons and Panzerfausts, always triggered mines or charging into carefully laid ambushes. Spearhead tank losses approached catastrophic levels, yet Poole volunteered repeatedly for that role. His crew never questioned his orders. They believed completely that War Daddy would navigate them through impossible odds. And impossibly, the Sherman kept rolling, kept destroying enemy vehicles, kept surviving as surrounding tanks burned and crews perished. At Dreux, Belgium, Poole cemented his reputation while commanding as platoon leader during the exploitation phase across France into Belgium. The 3rd Armored Division had advanced with such velocity that Poole, a staff sergeant, found himself leading 5 tanks because all officers had become casualties or were elsewhere. His column rolled down a road when German fire erupted from the left. German half-tracks and armored cars, desperately attempting escape from encirclement, had collided directly with the American column. Poole commanded his column onward while he wheeled in the Sherman to confront the threat directly. His crew located the German force, roughly a dozen vehicles clawing cross-country through fields and stands of timber. Poole closed to firing distance and unleashed his guns, destroying 6 enemy vehicles in rapid succession. The German formation disintegrated in panic, some vehicles bolting for open country, others returning ineffective fire. While Poole remained engaged with this group, radio traffic crackled with urgent news. A Panther tank had appeared ahead, actively engaging the American column. Poole faced a decision: continue eliminating vehicles already engaged, or accelerate back to face the more dangerous Panther threat. He chose urgency over completion. Poole commanded Richards to get them back to the column at maximum throttle. The Sherman accelerated to 25 miles per hour, far faster than sensible given terrain and visibility. Poole understood something fundamental. Those moments mattered enormously. His column needed immediate reinforcement. As they approached the reported Panther position, Poole scanned intently while Borg loaded armor-piercing ammunition and Ola positioned himself for engagement. Poole spotted the German tank nestled behind a low rise, methodically engaging the American column with focused, deliberate fire. The German tank enjoyed a prepared position with clear fields of fire, methodically servicing targets. 2 Shermans already burned fiercely. Poole watched crew members bail desperately through flames and smoke. The Panther's gun remained fixated on American targets ahead. That German commander hadn't yet registered Poole's approach from the flank. Poole immediately seized the advantage. "Never interrupt an enemy making a mistake," Napoleon had famously said. This Panther commander remained hypnotized by his front targets, exposing his side armor completely to Poole's approach. Poole gave his fire command. Gunner, Sabot, Panther, left flank. Ola swung the turret smoothly, placing his crosshairs on the exposed side armor just below the turret ring. On the way, the 76mm gun detonated, its round covering distance in a fraction of a second. The armor-piercing projectile struck the Panther's side armor and penetrated straight through, detonating inside the crew compartment. The German tank shuddered violently. Smoke billowed from hatches as flames appeared moments later. The crew attempted escape, but internal explosions had killed or incapacitated them. Only 1 German crewman scrambled free before ammunition detonated with apocalyptic force, tearing the turret completely from its moorings. Poole had destroyed his second Panther, again through superior tactics rather than superior firepower. He'd maneuvered to achieve a flank shot where his 76mm gun proved devastating and his crew executed flawlessly. The American column resumed advance, with Poole's tank claiming the spearhead position through demonstrated skill rather than formal assignment. August 7, 1944. The Falaise Gap battle represented one of the most consequential engagements of the entire Normandy campaign. Allied forces sought to encircle and annihilate the German 7th Army and 5th Panzer Army, constructing a trap near Falaise. Success meant destruction of Normandy's primary German force, clearing the path for rapid advance toward Germany itself. The operation demanded American forces driving north from the south to meet British and Canadian forces driving south from the north, sealing the pocket and trapping Germans inside. Poole's tank led Task Force Y of Combat Command A while closing the gap, with Lieutenant Colonel Richardson monitoring radio traffic from his command post. Fighting descended into absolute chaos and desperation. German forces trapped inside attacked American positions with ferocity born from survival instinct. German units positioned west of the pocket attacked American lines desperately, attempting to breach through and establish escape corridors for their comrades. The result became massive, confused fighting with units intermixed, meeting engagements flowing into ambushes across the Norman countryside. As Poole's column advanced, they encountered groups of German soldiers abandoning vehicles and heavy weapons, fleeing desperately on foot. Lieutenant Colonel Richardson listened to his radio as Poole approached this group of desperate men. Poole's voice came through clearly. "Ain't got the heart to kill them. The impulse was genuinely human and reflected Poole's essential character despite his fearsome combat reputation. German soldiers fleeing on foot presented no immediate tactical danger to Poole's mission, but Richardson recognized that Poole's pause reflected incomplete understanding. Then came the distinctive rattling of Poole's machine gun opening fire. Richardson heard Poole's voice once more. "Watch the bastards run, give it to them close." That moment of mercy evaporated before tactical necessity. German soldiers in retreat still posed genuine danger if allowed escape, regrouping, and rearmament. They'd receive fresh weapons and return to combat. More Americans would eventually die fighting these same soldiers if Poole permitted their escape now. Poole's responsibility centered on eliminating enemy capacity to resist, and he executed that mission completely, pushing past personal feelings. The exchange captured combat's terrible moral complexity. Decent men forced to commit terrible acts in service of necessary objectives. From August 29 through 31, 1944, Poole commanded the lead tank in an assault earning him the Distinguished Service Cross, America's second highest valor decoration. Division headquarters approved the citation, signed by senior commanders, detailing Poole's actions comprehensively. Poole had pushed alone beyond his task force, his aggressive momentum outpacing supporting armor in fluid combat circumstances, where positions remained unclear and enemy disposition unknown. Across those 3 days, advancing frequently solo or with minimal support, Poole's crew engaged and destroyed 4 German tanks separately. First came a Mark IV obliterated from ambush as it crossed a road. Second came a Sturmgeschütz assault gun eliminated at close range, following a brief running engagement through a village. Third and fourth came Panthers destroyed simultaneously when both German tanks opened fire on Poole's Sherman. Yet superior marksmanship and crew discipline eliminated both threats. Beyond tanks, Poole's crew destroyed 3 anti-tank guns positioned to ambush American armor. Roughly 50 unarmored vehicles, including half-tracks, trucks and automobiles, and inflicted massive casualties among German personnel. The citation stressed that Poole's unwavering courage and inspired leadership despite devastating hostile fire enabled rapid advance by his task force while minimizing casualties. His extraordinary heroism, personal courage, and complete devotion exemplified military service at its finest. The official citation actually minimized the true danger Poole had undertaken. Advancing largely unsupported, Poole deliberately positioned himself as a magnet for enemy fire, identifying hostile positions through personal exposure. Every anti-tank gun destroyed had gotten at least one shot opportunity at his tank. Every German tank he engaged theoretically could have destroyed his Sherman before he killed it. Poole survived through mastery, aggression, crew training, and tremendous luck. The Distinguished Service Cross acknowledged his conduct, though observers believed the Medal of Honor better reflected what he'd truly accomplished. Those 3 late August days proved definitively that aggressive tactics, superior maneuver, and excellent crew discipline could overcome numerical and technical disadvantage. The Sherman lacked the armor and firepower of German heavy and medium tanks, yet Poole established conclusively that crew quality determined engagement outcomes, not armor thickness or gun caliber. His example motivated other tank commanders across the division to fight with heightened aggression, accepting calculated risks, closing with enemies rather than maintaining distances where German technical advantages dominated. August 17, 1944. In northeastern France, Combat Command A was eliminating remaining German forces from the countryside during rapid exploitation. War had transformed into pursuit, with German forces streaming back toward Germany's borders while American armor raced desperately to destroy them before they could establish new defensive positions. Poole's tank led the attack when catastrophe struck from a completely unexpected direction. American P-38 Lightning fighters appeared overhead, hunting German armor. The P-38 featured twin engines and distinctive twin booms with central nacelle, normally welcomed by ground troops, providing close air support, attacking German convoys, and spotting enemy positions for artillery coordination. But today the P-38 pilots committed a fatal mistake. From altitude of several thousand feet, all tanks appeared essentially identical. The distinguishing profiles allowing ground personnel to recognize friend from foe became virtually indistinguishable from above. The P-38 pilots spotted tanks advancing through a French village and immediately assumed German armor. The lead pilot called the target and initiated his attack run, his wingman following close. The P-38s carried rockets, devastating anti-armor weapons when delivered from diving attacks. A German Panther tank concealed in a protected firing position opened up without warning. The Sherman shuddered under the impact of the first round, armor-piercing shells screaming through the metal hull. Pools stood exposed in the commander's position, scanning the street intersection ahead. When the explosion came, the turret erupted inward, a flash of superheated metal and force that turned the small space into a furnace. Private First Class Paul Kenneth King, the young gunner from Tennessee, filling in for Willis Oller on what was supposed to be this final safer mission, died instantly in that blast. The 20-year-old never saw the tank that killed him, never had a moment to react. A second round hit almost immediately after, striking the hull with catastrophic force and ripping through the tank's vital systems. The world went dark and violent for Pools. Shrapnel tore into his right leg, the metal fragments ripping through flesh and bone. The concussion from the explosion inside the confined turret threw him sideways, stunning him, filling his senses with noise and heat and the terrible knowledge that he had seconds to escape or die. Something deep inside him, something forged through months of constant combat, forced him to act. Get out. Now. The order came out instinctively. His crew didn't hesitate. Richards clawed his way through the driver's hatch, fighting past his own fear of being trapped. Close scrambled through the hull opening. Bugs pushed through the loader's hatch despite his injuries from the explosions. They moved with the desperate urgency of men who knew their tank was dying around them. Pools tried to climb through the commander's hatch, but his leg wouldn't support him. The pain and shock made everything blur together. His damaged leg simply wouldn't work. He struggled upward, fighting against his own body, fighting against the knowledge that ammunition was already beginning to cook off inside the hull, pressure building toward catastrophic secondary explosions. Then the Sherman tipped forward into a massive shell crater. The forward motion threw Pools halfway out of the turret, but the edge of the hatch caught him, trapping his body against the rim. For a terrible moment, he was stuck between escape and the dying tank. His crew, already clear and running for cover, heard him. They turned back into the fire and chaos without hesitation. They pulled their commander free from the hatch and dragged him away from the Sherman as ammunition began exploding inside the hull. They had perhaps seconds to spare before the tank became completely engulfed. Pools was conscious but sliding into shock. His right leg below the knee was destroyed, shattered by shrapnel and blast effects into something barely recognizable as part of a human body. Blood poured from the wound. His crew applied what first aid they could with the limited supplies available in combat, their hands shaking, calling desperately for medics, while shells still exploded around them. The medics arrived within minutes, moving with practiced efficiency through the chaos of the still ongoing battle. They stabilized Pools as best they could, working quickly to control the bleeding and prevent further shock. They prepared him for evacuation. His crew watched in silence as their commander was loaded onto a jeep, as he was driven away toward the rear and the field hospital, as the vehicle disappeared down the street. After 83 days of continuous combat, after 21 major attacks, after destroying 258 enemy vehicles, after killing over 1,000 German soldiers and capturing 250 prisoners, after surviving 3 complete tank losses, after leading the 3rd Armored Division through France with a reputation that had grown to legendary status. After everything, Pools' war was over. The damage to his right leg was too severe to repair. Surgeons removed the limb 8 inches above the knee, cutting away shattered bone and torn tissue in an operation that saved his life but ended his career as a tank commander. He was evacuated through the medical system, from field hospital to base hospital, eventually to a hospital in the United States, where he would spend months recovering from his injuries and learning to live without his leg. The In the Mood, the 3rd Sherman to bear that name, burned out and abandoned in the street intersection of Munsterbusch, Germany. Another tank destroyed, another crew sent to find replacement equipment. But this time, the commander who had led them through impossible odds would not return to lead the next attack. This time, the war was truly over for War Daddy Pools and his crew. The path to recovery stretched out long and demanding. Poole underwent multiple surgical procedures, battled through serious infections, and slowly relearned how to walk with his new prosthetic leg. Yet against all odds, he had survived. The numbers from those 83 days of combat remain stunning in the annals of American military history. Between June 29 and September 19, 1944, Poole and his crew annihilated 258 enemy armored vehicles. That total included 12 confirmed tank kills. They inflicted over 1,000 casualties on German forces, killing or wounding soldiers across multiple engagements. His unit captured roughly 250 prisoners during this period. They spearheaded 21 major attacks, consistently pushing into the most dangerous zones where few other crews would venture. Poole's tank was completely destroyed 3 separate times, first by a Panzerfaust strike, then by friendly artillery fire, and finally by a German Panther. His crew stayed with him through the first 2 catastrophic losses, but Kenneth King, one of Poole's gunners, paid the ultimate sacrifice during that final encounter. For his extraordinary actions from August 29th through August 31, Poole received the Distinguished Service Cross. The Legion of Merit followed, honoring his exceptional leadership across the entire campaign. Additional recognition came through the Silver Star for acts of bravery, the Purple Heart acknowledging his wounds, and the Belgian decoration honoring his role in liberating Belgium. Decades later, France would bestow upon Poole one of its highest honors, the Legion of Honor at the rank of Chevalier, recognizing his lifetime of military service. Twice during the war's end, Poole's name appeared on Medal of Honor nomination paperwork. The first submission vanished in the confusion of Europe's final combat months. The second went before the Army's review board, but was ultimately denied. The Army's decision rested on a troubling justification. Tank warfare, the board maintained, involved crew-operated weapons, not individual heroism. Therefore, a tank commander's actions, however brilliant, didn't qualify for America's highest award. This reasoning exposed a fundamental problem in how the military assessed valor. The board's thinking favored infantry operations while overlooking how tank commanders' tactical decisions, leadership choices, and combat skills determined success or failure in armored engagements. Many veterans who had served beside Poole considered this rejection a profound mistake. His achievements across those 83 continuous days of fighting demonstrated leadership and bravery that matched or exceeded Medal of Honor standards. Yet the decision remained final. Placing Poole's record within the broader scope of World War II, armor warfare reveals just how extraordinary his accomplishments truly were. America built roughly 49,000 Sherman tanks during the war, giving Allied forces decisive numerical advantages. Germany manufactured approximately 6,000 Panthers and roughly 1,350 Tiger Ears. On paper, German vehicles clearly dominated. A Panther's 75mm gun could destroy a Sherman from beyond 2,000 yards. American 76mm guns needed to close within 1,000 yards to reliably penetrate Panther frontal armor. The Tiger's 88 Metis gun proved even more devastating. Yet Poole demonstrated that superior tactics, better training, and bold leadership could overcome these equipment disadvantages. His 12 confirmed tank kills included multiple Panthers, the tank American crews feared most. He destroyed these technically superior machines through excellent crew coordination, smart positioning, and faster gunnery. Poole's example taught an entire generation of American tankers that aggressive tactics and closing to shorter ranges allowed American reliability, rate of fire, and crew skill to compensate for thinner armor and less powerful guns. After his recovery and adaptation to his prosthetic leg, Poole faced a critical decision about his future. He might have accepted medical discharge and returned to Texas for civilian life. Plenty of soldiers would have made that choice after giving so much. But Poole's identity was tied to the Army. The military had transformed him from a farm boy into America's most successful tank commander. He loved serving. Poole re-enlisted in July 1948, choosing to stay despite his physical limitations. The Army recognized his invaluable experience and assigned him to training and advisory positions where he could shape the next generation of tank crews. As an instructor, he passed along hard-won combat lessons. His expertise in armored tactics, tank gunnery, and maneuver warfare made him an exceptional teacher. Poole retired on September 19, 1960, exactly 16 years after his final battle at Munsterbusch. The matching dates seemed fitting, though unplanned. He completed his service with the rank of Chief Warrant Officer II, reflecting his technical mastery and leadership abilities. His 19-year career, beginning with his June 1941 enlistment and ending with his September 1960 retirement, included those transformative 3 months of combat that would define everything that followed. In civilian life, Poole settled in Killeen, Texas, near Fort Hood, where Army armor training remained centered. He maintained connections with the military community, attending 3rd Armored Division reunions and occasionally speaking to soldiers about his wartime experiences. He and his wife Evelyn raised 8 children together, 4 sons and 4 daughters. Their marriage had begun during a brief leave in December 1942 and endured through war, injury, and military life until his death. Tragedy eventually struck Poole's family in ways that echoed his own combat past. His son Jerry followed him into uniform and became an Army Special Forces officer. Jerry served in Vietnam during the war's most brutal period, leading reconnaissance teams deep into enemy-controlled territory as part of MACV-SOG, Military Assistance Command Vietnam Studies and Observations Group. These teams conducted some of the war's deadliest missions, inserting small groups into Laos, Cambodia, and North Vietnam to gather intelligence and execute direct action operations. On March 24, 1970, Captain Jerry Poole commanded a reconnaissance team conducting operations in Ratanakiri Province, Cambodia, approximately 14 miles inside the country. They were surveilling North Vietnamese supply lines when the helicopter transporting his team came under intense fire. The aircraft took hits, caught fire, and crashed. All 7 soldiers aboard perished. Jerry was only 29 years old. His remains lay in Cambodia for decades, officially listed as missing in action. Recovery teams from the United States, Vietnam, and Cambodia searched the crash site repeatedly over the years. On April 12, 1995, they finally located human remains at the location. These remains traveled to the Army's Central Identification Laboratory in Hawaii, where specialists used dental records, DNA analysis, and other forensic methods to establish identity. On June 20, 2001, more than 31 years after his death, the identification was confirmed. Captain Jerry Poole was coming home at last. He received full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. His name, which had appeared on the Courts of the Missing at the Honolulu Memorial, would now mark his grave. For Lafayette Poole, losing his son to war brought devastation that understanding couldn't ease. He knew better than most what military service demanded, the risks soldiers accepted, the possibility of dying in combat. That knowledge didn't reduce his grief. Lafayette Green Poole passed away on May 30, 1991, in Killeen, Texas, at age 71. He had lived nearly 47 years following his wounding at Munsterbusch, long enough to see his son reach adulthood, long enough to lose him to war. His military funeral honored him as one of America's greatest tank commanders. His influence lived on through the soldiers he had trained, the tactics he had proven effective, and the leadership example he had set for armored operations. In 1993, 2 years after his death, Fort Knox, Kentucky dedicated the tank driver training simulator facility in Poole's honor. The space became known informally as the Lafayette G. Poole Room, ensuring that every tanker training there would learn War Daddy's story and his crew's achievements. Lieutenant Colonel Olin M. Brewster, who had served alongside Poole in the 3rd Armored Division, delivered the dedication remarks. Brewster spoke of Poole's courage, his tactical brilliance, his care for his crew, and his transformative impact on American armored warfare. This dedication guaranteed that Poole's legacy would continue inspiring tankers for generations. Poole's story reached millions more people in 2014 through the film Fury, starring Brad Pitt. The movie's main character, Sergeant Collier, a Sherman tank commander, was explicitly modeled on Lafayette Poole. The Texas State Historical Association confirmed the connection between the character and Poole's actual combat record and leadership methods. The film showed tank combat's brutal reality, the numerical and technical disadvantages American crews faced, the aggressive tactics men like Poole employed to overcome inferior equipment. Though Hollywood required dramatic alterations, the film introduced Poole's story to audiences who might never have discovered it otherwise. The depiction of a Sherman crew fighting overwhelming odds through superior tactics and coordination captured Poole's actual combat philosophy. Sergeant Collier's aggressive command style, refusal to retreat, and determination to close with the enemy before German firepower could dominate. These characteristics came directly from Poole's documented behavior and from eyewitness accounts provided by 3rd Armored Division veterans. Poole's legacy extends far beyond memorials and films. His combat statistics remain unmatched. No other American tank commander in World War II, Korea, Vietnam, or any conflict since has approached his tally of 258 destroyed vehicles in just 83 days. The statistical improbability becomes clear through context. The average Sherman tank in Europe lasted approximately 11 days of combat before becoming inoperable or destroyed. Poole's crew survived 83 days across 3 different tanks, remaining combat effective after each replacement. The average American tank crew destroyed between 1 and 3 enemy vehicles across their entire service. Poole's crew destroyed 258. His success derived from understanding fundamental armored warfare principles and applying them relentlessly. Aggressive maneuvering brought him to ranges where German armor and firepower advantages diminished. Superior crew training enabled faster target detection, more accurate shooting, and superior tactical judgment under fire. Absolute refusal to break contact forced German crews into close-range fights where American rate of fire and crew coordination proved decisive. His willingness to accept risk and lead from the front inspired subordinates and prevented enemy forces from establishing defensive positions or deploying their superior weapons effectively. These principles, proven in Normandy's hedgerows and French plains, became foundational American armored doctrine. Poole's aggressive close combat tactics influenced tank commander training throughout the Cold War and into modern times. The emphasis on crew training, developing the synchronized precision his crew demonstrated, became central to American tank warfare doctrine. The recognition that superior tactics and training could overcome technical inferiority, proven conclusively by Poole's record, shaped how American military thinkers approached armored combat for generations. Poole's impact extended beyond tactics into military culture and leadership. His refusal to take a commission, choosing instead to fight from his tank rather than command from headquarters, exemplified leading from the front, an ideal military leaders embraced. His devotion to crew welfare combined with demanding performance standards created a leadership model balancing care with mission accomplishment. His aggressive enemy pursuit, tempered by tactical awareness, showed that boldness didn't require recklessness, that properly applied aggression often proved safest in combat. The nickname War Daddy captured Poole's essential leadership character. He was simultaneously the protective father, ensuring his crew received optimal training and support, and the aggressive warrior who led them repeatedly into the most dangerous situations. Crew members trusted him completely because they knew he would never ask them to do anything he wouldn't do himself, never send them into danger while remaining safe behind lines, never waste their lives for meaningless objectives. This trust, built through months of training and validated in countless engagements, created bonds between Poole and his crew that transcended death. The crew members who survived those 83 days carried Poole's lessons throughout their remaining lives. Wilbert Richards, the small but skilled driver who could maneuver a Sherman through seemingly impossible terrain, returned to civilian life yet stayed connected with fellow crew members and attended reunions. Bertrand Close, the teenage bowgunner who proved so lethal with his machine gun, similarly went home and built a life shaped by his experiences in Poole's crew. Delbert Boggs, the loader whose speed and reliability gave Poole's tank exceptional firing rates, carried memories from his time in the turret. Willis Oller, transferred back to America before the final battle, lived with complex survivor emotions. grateful for the temporary reassignment that saved his life, but haunted by guilt over not being there when his crew needed him. He had been Poole's gunner for most of the 83-day period, had fired shots destroying dozens of enemy vehicles, had been part of the most successful tank crew in American history. His transfer meant he wasn't present when Paul Kenneth King, his replacement in the gunner's position, died in the turret where Oller normally served. Paul Kenneth King, the young replacement gunner from Anderson County, Tennessee, served only one mission with Poole's crew. Though experienced and capable, having survived previous combat with other units, King drew the misfortune of filling Oller's position on September 19, 1944, when the German Panther found its target. At just 20 years old, King's death symbolized war's random cruelty. He died in what was supposed to be a routine mission before Poole's scheduled departure. His death illustrated the truth Poole had understood from the beginning. In warfare, safety remains illusion. Poole's broader contribution to World War II's outcome defies simple quantification, though its significance remains substantial. Those 258 enemy vehicles that Poole's crew destroyed represented far more than just lost equipment. Each destroyed vehicle meant German forces couldn't use it against advancing American units. Every tank Poole eliminated was one fewer threat to American infantrymen moving through the rubble of French towns. Each half-track or truck taken out meant fewer German soldiers could reach defensive positions in time. Every anti-tank gun silenced meant American lives preserved who might otherwise have fallen. But the real impact extended well beyond those immediate tactical victories. Poole's aggressive approach inspired other American tankers to fight with greater intensity, to take calculated risks, to charge at German armor instead of keeping distant and safe. His willingness to close to point-blank range shifted how American crews thought about tank combat. When thousands of American tank commanders began applying his principles, even imperfectly, his tactical influence multiplied across the entire European theater. The shift in American armored tactics through the summer and fall of 1944 owed something significant to Poole's demonstrated success. As units learned to fight more aggressively and effectively, they developed new confidence in their approach. The 3rd Armored Division's combat record reflected his influence directly. The division spearheaded the push from Normandy all the way to Germany, covering more territory and destroying more enemy equipment than nearly any other American armored division. The division's aggressive culture, its willingness to push deep into German territory and accept risk, embodied the approach Poole exemplified. While many factors contributed to their success, the example set by their most accomplished tank commander certainly shaped the division's fighting spirit. Poole's achievement also illuminates the larger American story in World War II. America entered the war with weapons that were often inferior to German equipment. The Sherman tank was outgunned and underarmored compared to German Panthers and Tigers. American soldiers often had less experience than German opponents who'd been fighting since 1939. German tactical doctrine, developed through years of actual combat, was in many ways superior to what Americans brought to the campaign. Yet America possessed crucial advantages that ultimately proved decisive. Industrial capacity could produce 49,000 Sherman tanks, while Germany managed only 6,000 Panthers, meaning American forces could absorb losses that would cripple German units. Training systems that emphasized crew coordination and combined arms operations meant American units, while perhaps individually less skilled than elite German formations, functioned more effectively as cohesive teams. A military culture that rewarded initiative and aggressive action allowed men like Poole to rise based on demonstrated ability rather than aristocratic background or political connections. Poole embodied these American strengths. He was a farm boy from Texas without military heritage or social standing who became the most effective tank commander in American history through pure skill, aggression, and leadership ability. His crew, drawn from across America, represented the diversity that Nazi ideology condemned as weakness but proved to be tremendous strength. Together they demonstrated that superior tactics, better training, and sheer determination could overcome technical inferiority and inferior equipment. The contrast between Poole's tank combat approach and typical German tactics reveals different military cultures and philosophies entirely. German armored doctrine emphasized technical superiority of their vehicles, encouraging commanders to engage from long range where superior guns and armor provided decisive advantage. German training focused on individual technical skill. German military culture valued strict obedience and maintaining formation discipline. Paul's approach inverted these principles. He eliminated German technical advantages by closing to ranges where they ceased to matter. He emphasized crew coordination over individual talent, understanding that 5 men working in perfect synchronization could outfight 5 individually talented men working independently. He valued initiative and aggressive action over rigid formation discipline, frequently operating alone or with minimal support rather than waiting for coordinated attacks with other units. These contrasting approaches reflected deeper differences between American and German military culture. German military tradition, shaped by centuries of Prussian heritage, valued hierarchy, discipline, and technical excellence. American military tradition, shaped by frontier experience and democratic values, valued initiative, adaptability, and practical results. Paul succeeded because he embodied the American approach and applied it ruthlessly against an enemy shaped by different values. The ultimate proof of Paul's tactical philosophy came in the war's broader outcome. German technical superiority and superior tank design could not prevent German defeat. The technically superior Panthers and Tigers, dominating German production in 1944 and 1945, couldn't compensate for Germany's industrial weakness, strategic overextension, and accumulated combat losses over years of warfare. American Shermans, dismissed by some as inferior death traps, played crucial roles in defeating Germany through superior numbers, better crew training, and more aggressive tactics. Paul's record complicates simplistic narratives about American tank warfare. The Sherman has been portrayed in popular culture as a poorly designed death trap that got American soldiers killed through inferior firepower and armor. This narrative contains truth. The Sherman was outgunned and underarmored compared to German medium and heavy tanks. American tank crews did suffer high casualties, and many Shermans were destroyed in combat. Yet Paul's record demonstrates that the Sherman in the hands of well-trained, aggressive crews was a highly effective combat vehicle. Paul destroyed 258 enemy vehicles, including 12 tanks, fighting from 3 different Shermans over 83 days. He survived 3 complete tank losses and continued fighting effectively after each one. His crew's success rate far exceeded anything achieved by crews in technically superior German tanks. The lesson emerges clearly. In armored warfare, as in most combat, crew quality matters more than machine specifications. This lesson extends beyond World War II tank combat. Throughout military history, military establishments struggle with balancing technical equipment excellence against effective personnel training. The temptation always exists to seek technological solutions to tactical problems, to believe superior equipment compensates for inferior training or poor tactics. Paul's record stands as permanent refutation of that belief. The finest equipment in the world, in the hands of poorly trained or timid crews, loses to inferior equipment used aggressively by well-trained soldiers. Modern armies continue studying Paul's combat record and extracting lessons applicable to contemporary warfare. The principles Paul demonstrated remain relevant in an era of computerized fire control systems, composite armor, and guided munitions. Aggressive maneuver to close with the enemy and fight at ranges that negate their advantages. Superior crew training emphasizing coordination and rapid decision-making. Leadership that inspires confidence and maintains morale under the most difficult conditions. These principles transcend specific technologies and tactical situations. The Tank Driver Training Simulator Hall at Fort Knox, dedicated to Paul's legacy, ensures these lessons continue reaching new generations of American tankers. Every soldier training at Fort Knox learns about Lafayette Poole, his tactics, his leadership, his combat record. The SSG Lafayette G. Poole Room functions as both memorial and classroom, where Poole's legacy lives through educating soldiers who will fight in conflicts he never imagined with weapons beyond his conception. Paul's story also serves as a sobering reminder of war's human cost and combat's arbitrary nature. Paul survived 83 days of combat, 3 tank losses, and dozens of close calls where German rounds missed by inches or failed to penetrate. He destroyed hundreds of enemy vehicles and killed over 1,000 enemy soldiers, yet lost his leg to German fire and watched his replacement gunner die in what was supposed to be a safe mission before going home. The randomness of who lives and who dies in combat, how survival depends often more on luck than skill, pervades Paul's story. Kenneth King's death on September 19, 1944, while serving as Paul's gunner in Willis Olar's position, emphasizes this harsh randomness. King wasn't Paul's regular crew member. He was substituting because Olar had been transferred back to the United States. King was experienced and capable, had survived previous combat, but happened to be in Paul's tank on the day a German Panther's aim proved true. If Olar had been there, perhaps he died instead. Maybe Olar's greater crew experience would have made some small difference in that battle, changing everything. These questions have no answers. King died, Olar lived, and both resulted from decisions made by Army personnel officers with no knowledge of their administrative actions' consequences. Paul's own survival through 83 combat days, followed by wounding on what should have been his safest day, carries similar ironies. He survived while most exposed, standing in open turrets, leading spearhead attacks, closing to point-blank range with German armor. He was wounded while supposed to stay on the flank, avoid danger, survive one more day before going home. The lesson, if one exists, is that in combat there are no truly safe positions. No guaranteed survival except not being there. Paul understood this truth from the beginning. Safety is an illusion. The only survival path is fighting aggressively, shooting first, closing with the enemy, and destroying them before they destroy you. This philosophy kept Paul alive for 83 days and made him America's most successful tank commander. It also cost him his leg and killed one crew member. Whether the price was worth paying depends entirely on perspective. From a tactical standpoint, Paul's combat service was extraordinarily valuable to the American war effort. From a personal standpoint, Paul paid a heavy price for his success and lived with those consequences for nearly 50 years. Both truths coexist without contradiction. Paul's decision to re-enlist in 1948 and continue serving despite his disability suggests he found meaning in military service transcending physical and emotional costs. He'd been transformed from a Texas farm boy into a soldier, from soldier into tank commander, from tank commander into legend. The army became his identity, his career, his life's work. Returning to civilian life seemed impossible for a man who'd experienced what Paul experienced, accomplished what he accomplished, and survived what he survived. His 19 years of military service from 1941 to 1960 spanned America's transformation from an isolationist nation with a small peacetime army into a global superpower with worldwide military commitments. Paul enlisted before Pearl Harbor, when the army still trained with wooden rifles and obsolete equipment. He retired during the Cold War when the army possessed nuclear weapons and maintained global deployments. He witnessed and participated in the most significant expansion and transformation of American military power in history. His death in 1991, just months before the Soviet Union collapsed and the Cold War ended, closed a chapter of American military history he'd helped write. World War II veterans, men like Paul, who fought to defeat fascism and preserve democracy, began passing away in large numbers by the early 1990s. Their generation had literally saved the world from Nazi tyranny, rebuilt Europe and Japan through the Marshall Plan and occupation policies, established the international order that defined the Cold War era. Paul's generation, tested in total war's crucible, proved that democracy could fight and win against totalitarianism, that free societies could match the military effectiveness of dictatorships, that American values justified fighting and dying for. Paul's legacy, embodied in his combat record, leadership example, and soldiers trained during post-war service, continues influencing American military culture. The aggressive tactics he pioneered remain central to American armored doctrine. The crew training and coordination emphasis he demonstrated continues defining American tank warfare. The leadership model he provided, combining paternal care for subordinates with demanding standards and personal example, remains an ideal for military leaders at all levels. Perhaps Paul's most important legacy is simpler and more personal. He proved that an ordinary American, a Texas farm boy without special advantages or privileges, could through courage, skill, and determination become extraordinary. He demonstrated that leadership emerges from character and action, not birth or rank. He showed that in combat's ultimate test, what matters is not the weapon you carry, but the courage you possess and training you've mastered. These lessons transcend military service and speak to broader American values about individual achievement, democratic opportunity, and ordinary people accomplishing extraordinary things. Lafayette Green Poole, War Daddy, the Texas farm boy who became America's deadliest tank commander, earned his place in military history through 83 combat days that remain unmatched in American armored warfare. His story, preserved in military records, survivor accounts, and popular culture through films and memorials, continues inspiring and instructing. The lessons he taught through his example about aggressive action, superior training, and effective leadership remain relevant decades after his death. His legacy lives on in every American tanker who learns his story, studies his tactics, and strives matching his example of courage under fire and devotion to duty. Ultimately, Poole's story transcends tanks and tactics, kill counts and combat records. It's about a young man's transformation from a South Texas farm into a warrior who led from the front, fought with unmatched aggression, and inspired generations of soldiers. It's about the bond between crew members who trusted each other with their lives and fought as one unit through months of relentless combat. It's about war's cost, measured in lost legs and ended lives and families forever changed. It's about an America that could take farm boys and college students, factory workers and teachers, and forge them into the military force defeating fascism and preserving democracy. Poole's 258 destroyed enemy vehicles, his 12 confirmed tank kills, his 1,000 enemy soldiers killed, his 250 captured prisoners, these numbers represent part of his story. But the complete story includes his refusal of a commission so he could fight from a tank, his devotion to his crew and their absolute trust in his leadership, his survival through 3 tank losses and determination continuing after each one. It includes his decision re-enlisting despite disability and serving another 12 years. His influence on generations of American tankers, learning his tactics and studying his example. His loss of his son to Vietnam War, connecting his World War II service to the next generation's conflict. His death in 1991, having witnessed America's Cold War victory following the Hot War, where he made his name. The complete story encompasses a life defined by service, sacrifice, and leadership. It's about a man who found his calling in combat's chaos, who discovered he possessed gifts for tactical thinking and aggressive action, making him exceptional. It's about those gifts' price, paid in pain and blood and deaths of men who fought beside him. It's about a legacy extending far beyond his own life, influencing military doctrine, inspiring soldiers, demonstrating ordinary Americans becoming extraordinary when tested by combat's ultimate challenge. Lafayette Green Poole, Staff Sergeant, United States Army, Chief Warrant Officer, twice holder of the Distinguished Service Cross, Legion of Merit, Silver Star, Purple Heart, Belgian Forager, and French Legion of Honor, destroyer of 258 enemy vehicles in 83 days of combat. America's deadliest tank commander, war daddy to his crew and legend to the army he served, died May 30, 1991 in Killeen, Texas. He was 71 years old. He left behind his wife Evelyn, 8 children, and a military legacy enduring as long as armies study armored warfare's art. His story, from a South Texas farm to France's battlefields to the Memorial Hall at Fort Knox, represents the best of American military tradition. Courage in combat, devotion to duty, leadership by example, sacrifice for country. These values, embodied in Poole's life and service, continue inspiring and instructing. War Daddy's war ended on September 19, 1944, but his legacy and deeds live on.